Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. We get the podcast back up and running in 2018 with a guest who has been taking stock of his last year living with SaaS business applications. Rod O'Connor is an ERP and accounting software veteran. He leads Briware Solutions, which has been a reseller of Dynamics GP for many years, but last year he tried something different. He migrated his own business from GP to what was then known as Dynamics 365 Financials, now known as Finance and Operations Business Edition, and soon the product is likely to have yet another brand name. Rod talks to us about what the adoption of SaaS has meant for his company, what it will mean for other SMB VARs who are still entrenched in the on-prem ERP world, and the evolution of Dynamics 365 and its add-on solutions market so far. Okay, Rod O'Connor, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
So what prompted me to reach out and ask if you want to join the podcast at this point in time was, I'd heard you talk over the fall, and I knew you had been someone who really had embraced cloud ERP and SaaS applications over the last year, both for yourself and for your business. And you recently talked about where you are sort of a year into that transition process or a year into changing your approach to adopting those kinds of applications. You just posted an article about sort of where you are 1 year on and some of the, maybe even the things you're looking forward to. So I thought maybe we could start by by asking you to just kind of give a little bit of a summary of how you've sort of transformed the way your own business operates in the last year in terms of your history with GP and maybe where you're looking and how you're operating now.
Sure thing. To be honest, it all started out as kind of a bit of a game, honestly, a bit of a challenge. So I sat down and we saw Dynamics 365 coming out, and I just wanted to see could I run a business like my own on it? And as I kind of dug into it, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it was perfect for a small business like mine. We kind of went through a bunch of different scenarios. We ended up joining together different best-of-breed cloud applications to come together with it. And so it was really more of a transition from old school infrastructure, VPNs, and everything like that to my staff being able to work from wherever they are. And we didn't have an office at the time. We were just kind of working and working from home for the most part. And so they were able to actually connect and get all the information they needed. And we didn't have to go through that whole old school VPN. We didn't have to go through the traditional have a server, dial in, have a place to have the server. There was no more me wasting time trying to maintain all of that. We actually have now a project management solution that's in the cloud. We have an accounting solution that's in the cloud. We have a support system that's in the cloud. And we kind of got rid of all the hardware. It's really just laptops and the same kind of routers that you would have at home.
Was the launch of the Dynamics 365 Business Edition Finance solution really what sparked this and made you sort of jump in with both feet? Because you were talking about, and I know you've written about having sort of a GP server sitting in your closet at home or something like that, which is a big transition, I would think.
It was literally under my desk at home in my office. And yes, it was a huge transition. And I'm not sure I would have made the jump, to be honest. I've been a GP partner for a long time. I've worked with GP for a long time, even before I was a GP partner. And not just GP, I've worked with other on-premise mid-market solutions. And I don't think I would have just made the jump. But it seemed like Microsoft was really kind of coming on strong with this whole Dynamics 365 concept. And I kind of thought, you know what, I think I have to at least look at it. And when I got into it, I did start to realize some of those benefits. It's not benefits I went looking for, but there are definitely benefits that I feel very strongly about today, especially for the small business, the startup companies, um, because there's really no upfront investment, and there's arguments both ways, buy now and don't pay later, or just keep paying as you go. Um, but yeah, to directly answer your question, I don't think I would have looked at it right away, or maybe ever. But since they were pushing on it, they kind of won me over.
Was part of the decision that if you were going to sell it and offer it to your clients or to prospects, that you needed to really, have that personal understanding of it, or was it more just for your own thinking about your own needs at that point?
It started out being about, can we trust it? How quickly could I learn it? Um, it was essentially a new product. I know it's based on Nav and kind of is driven by that engine, but they were pretty clear right from the start that it's not Nav moved to Azure, although, later on it will be. But they were pretty clear up front that this is basically a new product that's just based on the Nav engine. Um, so, it was basically a version one, and Microsoft hasn't always done awesome at version one. They tend to rock. I've often said this. They tend to rock version three, but
Okay.
well, I mean, look at the Surface, right? The Surface version
Yeah.
one came out. Nobody wanted it. Version two, I don't know anybody that ever owned it. Version three, and walk around the airport today, version 3 and 4 is where you're seeing it. So, um, that's kind of where Microsoft has always been in my mind, and I have no science behind that statistic. It's just, I've always felt that they rock version three. So was this version one really a version one or a version three? That's kind of what I was trying to suss when I started it. And I figured, it's a 30-day free trial. I'll see if I can transition my company to it. And next thing I knew, I was like, well, that's actually kind of cool. What could I do if I, and it kind of just ran from there. And here I am a year later.
Now the product has been evolving, so maybe we could dive into sort of what your experience has been over the last year, because as the financials product has evolved, and I guess gotten sort of edged closer to Nav, by adding functionality. Has that changed your view of it? Has it enhanced the experience? What's been your view there?
For sure. So with GP tends to be kind of, I don't know if it's a North American thing or whatever, but the windows are windows that I kind of always expect to find. And I had the same experience with Epicor and with Sage and a couple others. Payment is my favorite. Print checks or select checks or something checks is really easy to find in most of the accounting systems that I am used to working with. When I got to this one, honestly, it took me a long time to find a way to print an actual check because there's no window actually called select checks or print checks. As the system has grown over the past while, they've added a lot more kind of functionality and things I feel are getting easier to find. And I don't know if that's me or if that's the software, but even things like the inventory module is one of my favorites. When I first kind of got into this, the inventory module was really, really, really basic. It was, they had items, they had descriptions and stuff like that, but they didn't even really have locations or warehouses, which to me was kind of a big deal. They certainly didn't have a concept of minimum stock quantity or reorder multipliers or anything like that. As time has gone by, every month there's been a new release ever since they've put it out there, right up until this month. And nowadays they've got locations that you can do accounting by location. So like a site segment override, you can do. They do have kind of order quantities and stuff like that. They've even got assemblies, so kind of light manufacturing in there. There's a lot more coming out all the time, and it gets stronger and stronger. I mean that assembly bomb one I actually found while I was doing a demo for a customer at one point.
So that had been pushed in, and in the middle of a demo, you said, "Oh, look, there's something they've added," and I didn't even notice it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was honestly the customer asked me if they had bombs, and we were staring at the window, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, look, there's an assembly bomb window right there." And so we went in, we drilled into it, and were able to play with it. But yeah, it was one that I hadn't seen up until that point, and it turns out it had only been added in the release before that demo.
Right, right. That must. So maybe we could talk a little about what Briware Solutions actually sells these
Mhm.
days, because so you're selling the Dynamics 365 financial solution. You're still so you still have clients that run GP. Any other ERPs right now?
So those are the two ERPs we sell. We sell GP both on premise and hosted.
Hmm.
So we work with a couple of the hosting providers, both Angevity and WatServe,
Hmm.
and basically that's kind of it's still our core. I'm not going to lie, it's still a big chunk of our business simply because that's our history and that's where our client base was. Um, but the Dynamics 365 Business Edition has kind of allowed us to, I don't want to say go down market, but go side and down, so that we can go to some of the smaller companies that maybe GP wasn't a fit just on account of price. We've also actually started working with a couple of different CRM partners. So we're doing the 365 for sales, and we've taken on an office practice as well.
That's really interesting. And maybe we can get back to that one too. But one of the things I was kind of trying to lead toward with that was on your point about the 365 financials product sort of expanding and adding these important areas, bill of material or inventory and other inventory enhancements. Does that actually sort of change your target market? Are there certain features that you're looking for that if I got this, that would open up a certain type of company that I can't reach today? Or has it been has that been a factor?
I think there's a yes and a no.
Mm.
So by adding things like bills of materials and the ability to assemble, I can go to kind of smaller manufacturing companies, who, they don't need a dozen routings to get through their warehouse, or they don't need a bill of materials depending on which warehouse is making it. Stuff like that. Like I can go to the smaller manufacturing companies. Even something like a phantom bomb, GP can handle it, but 365 can't yet. Um, I can actually take these products and go, I can look at a customer and say, where are you in your business growth? And kind of what are you doing today? And what do you think you're going to be doing a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And, which one is the best fit? If your only goal is to go to the cloud, but you're very complex, well, GP does that wonderfully well today. But if your only goal is to go to the cloud or to simplify a process and you're actually a pretty simple company, 365 out of the box has some really cool stuff. And then with the ISV products that are coming out, and they're coming out really slowly, I got to say that's kind of one thing I've been a little disappointed with is the speed that we're turning around the ISVs. But as the ISVs are coming out, they're covering more and more and more, where 365 may eventually be at the point where I can take it into a very small company and let them grow into it. And they grow up to a point where, they're too big, but that will take many years as opposed to just a few. So smaller companies today couldn't pick up GP out of the box. It's just, there's a lot of configuration. It's not a cheap implementation, if you will, whereas you can put in 365 really quickly and not very expensively at all.
Sure, that makes sense. And since you mentioned the work to deploy the D365 financials, but then also find ways to bring the D365 sales
Hmm.
app in as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you're approaching that today? It's an area to me is a little in maybe a little bit of not flux, but there's this new solution on the horizon. So how are you handling it today?
So there's kind of two answers. There is the out of the box integration between the two. Um, Not gonna lie, I haven't had a ton of success internally with that. So what I've been doing, I do have a customer running it and myself. Basically, where we are is I'm really focusing on the smart connects, and
Hmm.
I don't know how you guys like to talk about third parties, but Smart Connect from E1 Solutions is a product I've always worked with under GP. We've
Right.
integrated with CRM from GP using Smart Connect in the past. And kind of when I got to a point where my own financials implementation, I needed something to integrate with it. Smart Connect was just kind of a natural transition for me. They can do REST adapters, which means my teamwork is tying into my financials really, really easily, and it didn't take a ton of code. And so that's how I'm handling the both the sales and the financials integration where I can.
Interesting. Okay. And I was just looking at your sort of 1 year report, and there were some other areas um, where you've at least done some investigation and found some interesting apps. And yeah, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about a couple of those that you've kind of called out here. So, you start with, and it's funny the way you sort of talk about it that you sort of go out searching, and if you don't have one in mind already, you kind of go out see what you can find and maybe
Mhm.
stumble across something or just test out a couple or pilot them. How's that experience been overall? And I don't know, maybe we could talk about a couple that you've actually found to be useful.
I've been pleasantly surprised with the app source. I
Ah,
wasn't quite certain at first kind of how it would go because there's a bunch of different marketplaces out there, or there have been over the years, and this was just kind of another one. But you know what? I go out there probably about once a week, maybe every other week, depending how busy I am, and just kind of see what's out there that I don't recognize. And so I stumbled on, you mentioned some of the ones I've done. I stumbled on a payroll module, and I got to be honest, I kind of overlooked it a bunch of different times. I actually ran GP payroll for a couple of months after our go live, and I would actually just import the journal entries from GP payroll into my 365 implementation, just because I could. Um, and I overlooked the payroll module that I was seeing in the app source because it didn't very clearly indicate whose payroll it was. And I just automatically assume it's US payroll all the time. For the listeners who don't know, I'm Canadian.
yeah,
And so I just clicked on it one time just to see what it was and what it was about. And it turned out it was a Canadian payroll module. And I was able to move my entire payroll over in like a day and a half. So it was actually pretty cool. It was interesting. So if you go out there and you take a look at what's available, I mean, there's a ton out there already. Um, with that said, it's not changing terribly often. Um, there's a couple that I'm waiting for that I know have applied. That seem to be taking a long time to get out there. So I don't know if there's just a backlog or what, but
hmm. So the things you're finding are some of them are quite helpful, but you need to see more volume or more
yeah.
options out there to really round out if you really want to fill out a solution to the max.
Absolutely. I mean, something simple like a jet reports, for example. I know it's been out there for a while in application stage, but it's still not there on the marketplace. Stuff like that.
Have you gotten your hands dirty with the services offerings on AppSource yet?
So I haven't. A little bit self-serving, so I'm probably not the right customer for that. I've taken a look at what else is out there, and I do plan to put an offer out there. Um, it's just one of those, trying to figure out how my business should work around that model.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so let's see what else. You talked about adoption and user adoption. Are there some differences that you've seen over the last year between, say, the more traditional, um, GP model versus what? And I know it's different kinds of businesses often, most times, but to what you'd see in the D365 financials, either for your own company or for some of your clients.
So, from my own company perspective, yes, I'm definitely seeing that difference. I do have consultants who have been consulting for a very long time, and I have some who are kind of pretty new to it. And so I find that the ones who've been around for a while are actually having a harder time adapting to this kind of in the cloud, open access to everything, but share everything kind of attitude. Whereas my new folks they're kind of looking at it and they're going, wow, I have all this information, I have everything I need. Um, even simple little stuff like Skype, a quick Skype message while you're in a meeting, it doesn't seem very cloudy, but it's a big deal where you can very quickly answer a question just by sending an IM, right? And I know that's been around forever, but it's kind of it kind of builds from there, right? If all of my files are out in SharePoint and everything is available through my CRM and everything's available through my financial system, and I can very quickly find all the information that I need without having to worry about technical issues, connecting to a VPN, it's a huge difference. But some of the older guys they still want to keep everything on their C drive, and they don't necessarily want to throw it out on the network. So we're working on that.
Do you get a lot of? I hear you saying that, and I just think to myself, boy, some of those were nice, or those are the types of services that maybe a lot of firms counted on doing for their clients that will go away. Do you hear from other GP pros or other ERP implementation firms, other business owners who want to know from you how you've changed your outlook on on that side of it, in terms of some of these things that really do make life easier for customers, but were services that maybe had been needed in the past?
I get asked that a lot. I don't have a great answer. It has to be a mind shift, frankly. There's been a lot of different mind shifts over the past, I'll say, 10 years or so, and this kind of needs to be one of them. Um, Most of the economy is going to like a sharing economy, if you will. And I think
Hmm.
as consultants, we need to focus on what's that old saying? Teach a man to fish. We need to focus on teaching men to fish or people to fish, um, as opposed to actually trying to go catch fish for them, because people aren't really willing to pay for the time it takes to catch a fish. They are willing to pay for the time it takes to learn to catch a fish, um, and then they just want to go out and do it, or whatever that kind of marketplace is. Um, for ourselves, we always call it the heavy lifting. We'll teach you how to do all the day-to-day stuff. You shouldn't have to call me to create a user. You shouldn't have to call me to um, run a backup. You shouldn't have to call me to restore your test environment. You should call me if you have a pretty significant integration between two disparate systems, because that's not something that happens every day, but it happens every day
Hmm.
for us. So that's kind of the mentality I've been trying to give to our staff and to other partners is, the old days where we know everything and nobody else knows anything, they're kind of gone. Google replaced that part. But there's a certain amount of heavy lifting that is still out there for us, and that's what we need to be. We need to be the heavy lifting guys.
Interesting. Uh, I guess the last thing I really wanted to um, learn a little more from you was just looking forward. We're still in January, and I think there's a lot of expectations of what kind of progress Microsoft's going to make in just a huge number of areas that you've touched on between, Office products and the Dynamics 365 suite and integration between different apps and app stores. Are there other maybe things we haven't touched on yet, or just areas you're really eager to see some results on looking further into this year, maybe through the spring into the summer?
So I am pretty interested to see in kind of what happens next with the financials product. There's a lot of talk about, what's going to happen in spring, and there's all those articles. It's dead, it's not dead, whatever. I'm interested to see kind of if they can get it together from a messaging standpoint and actually give us the product that, well, convince us that they have the product that they do have, because what they have today is awesome. And if we could take that out there and really confidently show it to folks and say, here's what it is, here's what it's called, here's what it's going to cost, I know that we as partners could sell a ton more of it. I'm also interested in seeing kind of how they push the one contract or the one reseller, right? So that one partner who sells absolutely everything and just brings in subcontractors. It's a way that a lot of partners have worked for a lot of years, but I'm interested in seeing how Microsoft kind of influences that. So those are the kind of the two areas that I'm interested in the most.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess as a follow on, do you see yourself or your company ever becoming a sort of having sort of an equal knowledge or expertise in the full nav side of the world as the Dynamics 365 financials does evolve, or as Microsoft evolves nav, I guess you'd say, later this year? Do you see that becoming a possibility? I'm just thinking because you built up skills, obviously, in the financials product now, and sort of are on that train as it adds features.
So I'm actually trying to make that decision right now. So nav traditional is actually it's a relatively complex implementation.
Sure.
It's not just a set it and forget it. And even GP isn't. And I decided years ago to focus on GP. I like where they have 365 today, the financials, where it's a relatively simple implementation. I also like the idea of where they're taking it, where it is as configurable as nav is. So I can bring in all of the nav ISVs. I have a customization layer. I think that really sets it apart from the other kind of simple to implement ERP solutions that are in the cloud today. Do I see myself personally learning everything that nav is? I'm not sure that I'm there. Maybe a little long in the tooth for that, but I might hire the right people who can learn all those things and drag me along with them.
All right. Well, Rod, thank you so much for sharing all these experiences. I think you've done a great job of sort of being really open in the last year and a half about where you've been going and your explorations in this stuff, and I think a lot of people really appreciate sort of hearing that perspective. And thanks for bringing it to us today.
Awesome, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Rod O'Connor for joining today. Let us know what you think. You can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.